You want to know what the best training plan is to build muscle and get jacked? Not the one you're doing right now, probably. How do I know? Because you wouldn't have clicked on this video if what you were doing was working, which tells me one thing. You're not seeing the results that you think you should be for the time and effort you're putting into the gym. Your physique doesn't reflect your training. Basically, you don't look like you lift. And you want to look like you lift, because of course you do. We all want that. That's why we lift weights. We tell people it's because we want to feel strong or that it's good for our mental health. But we all know it's to look good in a t-shirt and without one. So you want to know, how do you find the most optimal training program? So you're here because you want to know how to find the most optimal training program. Well, you start by forgetting about doing anything optimal, because optimal only exists for actors, professional athletes, and those fucking TikTok teenagers that preach discipline and patience while they're just off screen banging gear in their ass. We're not looking for optimal. We're looking for a program that's going to give you the physique that you actually want. So you're going to start by answering two simple questions. What do I want to do? And what can I do? Because the most optimal training program is going to have you training 6, maybe 7 times a week. It's going to have you training different muscle groups on each day, giving adequate recovery to each muscle group and training them up to 3 times a week, which is why you have to do so many sessions. Whereas the right training plan for you is going to meet you at the answers you've just given to the questions I asked you, which, if I had to guess, is going to be a maximum of 4 sessions a week with an average of 3, i.e. not optimal. But that's not a problem, because you can do a lot in 3 days as long as you know what you want to do. And this is the thing a lot of lads don't actually ask themselves when they start training. What do you actually want? Do you want to get big? Do you want to get strong? Do you want to get fit? Do you want to get fast? Do you want to get mobile? Probably not. And instead, they'll just start on beginner programs like Ice Cream Fitness and Starting Strength, which are brilliant programs if you want to get strong. But if you're not asked about that, there's no point doing them and wasting your time. And this is coming from a guy that followed those training programs for 3 years. So my advice is to pick your 2 main goals from strength, hypertrophy, speed, endurance, or general fitness, and then rank them number 1 and number 2. And again, I'm just going to take a guess that hypertrophy is number 1 and everything else comes secondary. Then when you've got your rankings, you're going to be honest with yourself about how much training you can manage every single week. So don't say 5 sessions if you know it'll be 3, but also don't say 1 session if you know you can do 4, because we're trying to build something that's actually going to give you the physique you want here. And surprise, surprise, that's going to take time, effort, and commitment. So you have to be honest with yourself about how much of each one of those you can manage every single week. And now you're clear on those 2 questions, you've got a couple of options. You can find a training program that someone else has built that matches the goals that you've got. And depending on what goals you decided on, I've probably got a training plan that you can grab for free in the description box below this video. Or you can hire a coach, but I'll talk about that later maybe. Or you can build your own. But Josh, I don't know how to build a training program. Well, my sweet summer child, let me show you. Change of scenery, but let me explain how we're going to program for the different goals that I listed. Let me turn towards the screen. Representing Puma. In case you don't know, the founder of Puma was the brother of the guy who founded Adidas. Something else you might not know, the founder of Adidas was called Adolf Dassler. His nickname was Adi, but Adidas, so Adidas. But you didn't know that? I thought Puma was American. It's actually German. There you go. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that. How do you program for hypertrophy? It might sound obvious, but the first thing you're going to do is pick the main muscle groups that you want to focus on. So if you want to get big up top, you don't need to focus on legs that much. That's not to say you shouldn't train legs, but they can just take a lot less volume and give more volume to the upper body. So we want to get massive, don't we? We want to get massive arms like that, just like mine. Well, at least that's what I'm doing right now, which is why I train arms 3 times a week. I train shoulders specifically 3 times a week as well. So a lot of my strength training is upper body focused as well, specifically chest, arms, shoulders, and back. I know that's all your upper body, but those are the main muscle groups I'm working. I give more volume to my shoulders and my arms than I do to my chest and my back though. That's just what I want to do. Now, in terms of volume, once you've ranked your muscle groups, you're going to give the majority of your volume to the muscle groups you really want to grow, and you're going to give the minority of the volume to the muscle groups you're not that bothered about, but you don't want to be left behind. We're not looking to look like Bill and Ben, the Flower Pot Men, which is a reference that shows my age. You don't want skinny legs. You don't want to have to wear long board shorts on the beach. You want legs that look at least like you train them, but not that they'll get your dominant muscles. So, recommendation-wise, between 10 to 20 sets across the 7-day week. as we use the Gregorian calendar. Personally, I would recommend giving closer to 20 for the muscle groups you really want to grow and closer to 10 for the muscle groups that you're not that bothered about. So for me, I'd push closer to 20 sets on my shoulders and I'd push closer to 10 sets on my legs. Just because, as I said, I'm happy with my legs, I want my shoulders to really grow. Honestly, I would actually recommend starting at 10 and then building up. See how well your muscle groups recover from it. Are you recovering well? Are you able to do more, as opposed to starting at 20 and not having anywhere to progress? In terms of rep ranges in those sets, between 6 and 15 reps. I know that's a wide range. You've probably heard 8 to 12 reps being the sweet spot, but honestly, anything more than 6, anything less than 15 for me is the sweet spot. So I'll do sets of 6 to 10, I'll do sets of 8 to 12, I'll do sets of 12 to 15, 10 to 15, just to mix things up a little bit. What I would recommend personally is sets of 6 to 10. They're a lot more enjoyable than sets of 8 to 12, but this is really like minutia that isn't that important. As long as you're falling within the 6 to 15 rep range for your sets, you're golden for hypertrophy. And then in terms of frequency, at least 2 times a week for each muscle group. You can train more. Like I said, I train my shoulders and my arms 3 times a week, minimum of 2. Whatever best fits for you to get the number of sets in you want for the muscle groups across the week. So if you're looking at 20 sets for shoulders, again, as an example, that's just because what I'm doing. In 20 sets into 2 days, 10 sets per muscle group just for the shoulders. There's going to either be very long workouts or going to be very specific workouts. So ideally, choose a frequency on the higher end if you're going to be doing more sets. If you're on the lower end of the sets, you can choose a smaller frequency. Your sessions won't be as long. Hopefully that makes sense. Personally, for hypertrophy, I actually prefer machines. I prefer stability because we want to be pushing very close, if not to failure. Talking between 0 and 2 reps shy of failure. You can do that very safely on machines because you don't need to worry about dropping the weight on you. The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to push out for a rep and not be able to do it and just return the machine back to its starting position. The more stable you are, the easier it's going to be to push close or to failure. And those are the main considerations you want to make for hypertrophy training. Now, when it comes to strength, this is going to sound really simplistic, but you want to choose the movements that you actually want to get strong in. So if you're not asked about a heavy squat, you're not going to be prioritizing squat. But most of the time, people want to get strong in shoulder press, bench press, squat, or deadlift. How did I forget deadlift? Everyone wants to have a strong deadlift. But if there's other moves that you want to be strong in, like pendlay or bent over rows, if we're talking about specific machines like leg press or hack squat, those are the exercises that you're going to prioritize. Your strength workouts are going to be built around the exercises you want to get strong in. Again, I know it sounds simple, but this is what a lot of people don't consider with a strength program, is they'll just do a standard squat, bench, deadlift, and then they're not asked about squatting, or they're not asked about deadlifting, and so they're doing exercises that they don't really enjoy. They're getting stronger in exercises that they don't actually have any interest in. Now, once you've got those exercises, you're going to split your 10 to 20 sets across the week. Because we're talking strength, you're going to be pushing close to failure, you're going to be using heavy weights. I genuinely would advise starting with 10 sets a week and then building up to 20 sets. Unlike hypertrophy, where you're working in higher rep ranges, you're potentially working smaller muscles that recover really quickly. Strength exercises are incredibly fatiguing, not just on the muscles, but on the central nervous system, on your body as a whole. So starting on the lower end and working up gives you much more room for progress, much more room for recovery as well. We're not looking to batter ourselves. Personally, I recommend keeping all your strength sets in the 1 to 6 rep range. That can be sets of 3 to 6 for the higher rep stuff and sets of 1 to 3 for the lower reps. Now, personally, I'd recommend, if you're focusing on strength, to have 3 sessions a week and put 2 exercises in each workout. So let's just say, for example, you actually want to get strong in shoulder press and squat and bench press and deadlift. First workout of the week, I would have you doing bench press and squat as an example. Second one, I'd have you doing shoulder press and deadlift. Just 2 exercises in each one, because one, it's going to keep the workouts shorter because you're going to be resting longer because these are strength sets, they're heavily fatiguing, and 2, it allows a lot of recovery in between sessions, so ideally leaving at least 24 hours between. So good example, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then if you want to just keep repeating, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I'm sure you can use a calendar. Then once you've built your strength workouts and your strength volume, you put in exercises to work on your weakness. For example, if you find as you're progressing that you're struggling to get the bar off your chest in the bench press, so it's the first half of the lift, you want to be putting in more chest volume, more specific chest volume to strengthen the chest muscles. If you're struggling to go from halfway all the way up to lockout, you want to be putting in more tricep volume. So You initially design your strength workouts to focus on the exercises that you want to improve. Then you put accessory exercises that you know are going to help around it. So as an example, if you wanted to get stronger at deadlift, you would put in some hamstring work, you'd put in some glute work, you put in some lower back work, and you put in some upper back work. If you're trying to get stronger at shoulder press, you want to be doing tricep work and then isolated shoulder work as well, just to strengthen all of the muscles involved. But as you get stronger, as you start to find the weaknesses in your lifts, you can then target specific weaknesses with exercises and then build your accessory work around strengthening your weaknesses, as opposed to initially when you build a strength program where you just put in the accessories, working the muscles that either aren't targeted by the main compound lifts that you're doing or that you know will be helpful. So moving on to cardio endurance goals. Now, if you're wanting to train for speed, you're going to have to do cardio that focuses on your top speed. So we're looking at sprint intervals and we're looking at threshold work. Threshold being longer intervals that you aim to do at your race pace or your target pace. You can design your intervals however you want, minimum of 1-to-1 work to rest. So 30 seconds on, 30 seconds rest, anywhere up to 3-to-1 where you're 30 seconds on, a minute and a half rest. You can start on the top end of the rest and then bring it down as your fitness improves, or you can start on the bottom end and then slowly increase the speed of the interval, and then as a result increase the time that you spend resting as well. There's kind of no wrong way to program intervals if you stick to between a 1-to-1 and a 3-to-1 ratio. But you want to be doing all your intervals above race pace, so faster than the pace you're wanting to go, because you're going to be doing them for shorter periods of time than the actual race, the actual thing that you're training for. You can go over your race pace, train yourself to run faster or sprint faster or row faster or cycle faster than you need to, because you're only doing it for a shorter period of time. Now for your threshold work, as I mentioned, these are going to be longer, hard sessions, so they're going to be broken up by rest, but the threshold work that you do wants to be at the target pace that you're aiming for. So for example, if you're aiming for a 20-minute 5K, you want to be running your threshold intervals at 15 kilometers an hour. That's a 4-minute kilometer. And then over time, you increase the distance or the time that you spend in the threshold so that you eventually get to the distance that you want to do. So as an example, if you're training for 5K, you might start your threshold intervals at 500 meters, and then you'll increase them to 750 meters, and then to a kilometer, and then progressing up to that until eventually you can run that pace at the 5K that you want, and then you can do a test. And as to what kind of cardio machines you should be using for speed work, choose the modality that suits what you're training for. So if you're trying to get faster on your bike, do your intervals, do your threshold work on a bike. If you're trying to get faster at running, track outside or on a treadmill. Because you're trying to get faster at a specific skill, you want to be practicing getting faster at that specific skill, which I know sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised. If we're looking at endurance as the goal, we're looking to just be able to accumulate more and more distance or more and more time. And endurance is where you've probably heard about the term zone 2, which refers to the second heart rate zone on a heart rate monitor. Now you don't need a Garmin like I've got, you don't need an Apple Watch. A really easy way of knowing if you're in zone 2 is just to answer a question, which I know sounds quite simple, but could you hold the pace that you're going at for like hours on end? Like you could comfortably say, I could do this for like a couple of hours without needing to worry that I'd get gassed or I'd stop. There's another way of testing it as well. You can do what's called a talk test, which is where you try and say a 12 to 15 word sentence without taking a breath. If you need to take a breath in between, you're at zone 2 pace. If you're gasping, if you can't even get out a couple of words, you're going way too fast. In terms of what your zone 2 heart rate would actually be, if you've got a Garmin, it will tell you. You can use a heart rate zone calculator, but they're not accurate for any more than like 80% of people. I'll cover how to do that in another video because that's like quite a complicated topic. But you're going to do all your endurance cardio at that intensity. And the reason for that is it's a really easy intensity to recover from, which means that you can do a lot of volume, recover quickly, get fitter, and be able to accumulate more and more volume very, very quickly with very little stress on the body. Now, the type of cardio you do for your endurance, it doesn't really matter. I'd recommend a low intensity one like bike or rower or the cross trainer, even incline walking. We just don't want to be putting a lot of stress on the body because we're looking to accumulate a lot of volume, and the lower stress we can put on the body, the lower intensity, the more volume we'll be able to accumulate over the week. Recommendation wise, I'd start with about 60 minutes a week. You can break that into 3 20 minutes, you can make it into 2 30 minutes, however you want. Start 60 minutes, see how you recover from that, and then increase it over time. Anything up to 180 minutes a week, you're going to be capping out at like the benefits, the health benefits of that. And then that brings me on to fitness as a goal, which is quite a vague term and people define it very, very differently. I think of it as a combination of speed and endurance. You can go kind of fast for kind of a long time. And when it comes to fitness, I personally break it down into two things: your peak fitness and your base fitness. So your peak fitness is how fast you can go, and your base fitness is how long you can go for. So for fitness, we'd be looking at speed work for your peak speed and then lower intensity work for your base speed, so we can bring them both up together. In terms of recommendation wise, I'd put 20% of your work at your peak and 80% of your work at your endurance. So again, if we're going to use an hour of cardio as an example, we're going to do 12 minutes of interval work, 12 minutes of speed work, and then 48 minutes of lower intensity base building work. Now, when I say 12 minutes of speed work, that doesn't mean a 12-minute workout. It means 12 minutes running at a fast speed. So if we're talking 30-second intervals, that would be 24 intervals across the space of a week. And then the 48 minutes, I'd personally recommend not splitting it any more than into two 24-minute. Now, if you've chosen strength or hypertrophy plus speed, endurance or fitness, you can combine your plans together. And while there's nuance to this topic that I'm going to save for another video, a great rule of thumb is weights first, cardio second. And the reason for that is twofold. The first is you'll want to be fresh for lifting things under heavy load. And the second one is you don't really get many adaptations from doing weights fatigued, but there are many adaptations that you will get from doing cardio already pre-fatigued. And there you have it, a practical guide to building a training plan that's going to put all the optimal ones to shame when it comes to building a physique that you actually want. And this is spoken from the experience of a guy who 90% of the time has to combine his sessions to fit his training into his week, which definitely isn't optimal, but it hasn't stopped me beating my best PB lifts while getting bigger, faster, stronger, all at the same time, and when I want, even leaner, all while being chronically under-recovered and underslept because I have a son who's under 2 years old. And as I mentioned earlier, you could hire a coach to help you with all this. And if after this video you fancy having me as your coach, you've got a couple of options. There's a link to a 4-week training program down below that's absolutely free, where I'll coach you for the first 4 weeks to show you what my coaching is like. Or you can drop a comment below or send me a message on Insta and we'll book in a chat to discuss my one-to-one coaching and how it could help you. Either way, if you follow my advice, you're gonna get jacked. So enjoy your training in a bit.